In the suffocating autumn of 1859, within the isolated confines of Meow Creek, Louisiana, a medical case began to unfold, so bewildering and terrifying it would become one of the most documented in the American South before the Civil War. At its center was a 7-year-old black boy named Samuel Carter. Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, the region's sole formally trained physician in an area where folk healers and midwives still dominated, filled 2 leather-bound journals with her observations. She recorded the details of a child whose capabilities defied every known law of human nature. To the casual glance, the boy appeared ordinary, small, frail, with dark, rarely blinking eyes and skin the color of rich Mississippi soil. But behind that unassuming exterior dwelled an intelligence the science of that era could not begin to classify, let alone comprehend. Over 7 terrifying months, 9 individuals met their end under inexplicable circumstances, each one having interacted with Samuel Carter. All were discovered with their eyes wide open, frozen in a final moment of witness to something that seemed to exist beyond the edges of human comprehension. The boy claimed he could hear voices emerging from the swamp, whispers that carried secrets, unveiled hidden truths, and announced deaths yet to come. He possessed knowledge no illiterate child should have, precise anatomical details of the human body, an understanding of diseases before their symptoms ever manifested, and the intimate, unshared dreams of the people around him. Before we delve deeper, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments which city you're listening from. We love connecting with our global audience. Thank you, and now, let's continue with this incredible story. Official records from this period were partially destroyed during the chaos of the Civil War, but the journals of Dr. Monroe survived, concealed for over a century in the attic of her former home. What these fragile pages reveal about Samuel Carter challenges our most fundamental understanding of the human mind's limits. They raise disturbing, persistent questions about the existence of capabilities that science, even now, struggles to explain. This is the story of a black child whose extraordinary gifts terrified white society, whose profound intelligence threatened the very foundation of a system built upon the lie of black inferiority. His fate stands as a stark reminder of the countless brilliant black minds that were silenced, hidden, or utterly destroyed for the simple, dangerous act of daring to be extraordinary. Before we continue with the story of Samuel Carter and the terror that descended upon Monroe Creek, if this account is piquing your curiosity, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. You won't want to miss our deep dives into America's most haunting historical mysteries. And please, let us know in the comments what state or city you're joining us from today. We truly love hearing from our worldwide community of mystery enthusiasts. Samuel Carter first drew breath in the spring of 1852, born on the Whitmore Plantation, one of the most expansive cotton operations in all of Ascension Parish. His mother, Esther Carter, served as a house servant, a woman who had secretly learned to read despite the harsh laws that forbade literacy among the enslaved. She would trace letters in the dirt behind the kitchen house, teaching her young Samuel in hushed whispers and stolen moments. His father, a man whose name was never recorded in any official document, had been sold away before Samuel's 2nd birthday. Esther rarely spoke of him, but sometimes, Samuel would wake in the deep of night to find his mother sitting by the window, silent tears tracing paths down her face as she stared into the darkness beyond the slave quarters. When Samuel was just 4 years old, a persistent cough took hold of Esther, a sickness that simply would not release its grip. The plantation owner, Robert Whitmore, refused to call for a doctor to attend to a slave, insisting she continue her duties even as her condition deteriorated relentlessly. Samuel would sit beside his mother through the night, his small hand clutching hers, and he would tell her things that filled her with a deep, chilling dread. "Mama," he whispered one night, his voice carrying a weight no child's voice should ever have to hold, "the sickness is in your chest, growing like a flower. It has roots that are spreading. The voices from the swamp tell me it will take you before the cotton blooms again." Esther died 3 months later, in the February of 1856, coughing blood into rags that Samuel tried desperately to keep clean. He was only 4 years old, yet he did not cry at her funeral. He stood silent and utterly still as the other enslaved people sang spirituals over her grave, laid to rest in that corner of the plantation reserved for black bodies, a place without markers or monuments. When someone asked him why he didn't weep, Samuel replied with a simple, unnerving clarity, "She's still here. She talks to me now, like the others in the swamp. She says she's finally free." A palpable fear of the child began to circulate among the other enslaved people on the Whitmore plantation. There was something in his eyes, they whispered to one another, something old and knowing that had no place in one so young. He would stare at people with an intensity that made them profoundly uncomfortable, as if he could see straight through their skin and into the very depths of their souls. Old Jeremiah, who had been on the plantation longer than anyone could remember, warned the others that Samuel had been born with a caul over his face, a sure sign that he could peer into both worlds, the world of the living and the world of the dead. "That boy got the sight," Jeremiah cautioned. "He know things that ain't meant to be known by folks still walking this earth." Robert Whitmore also noticed Samuel's strangeness, but his concern was of a different nature entirely. The boy was simply too smart, too observant, too articulate for a slave child who had never received a day of formal education. When Samuel was 5, Whitmore caught him drawing in the dirt. These were not childish scribbles, but detailed, anatomical sketches of the human heart, complete with labels written in careful, precise script. "Where did you learn to write, boy?" Whitmore demanded, his voice sharp with suspicion and rising anger. Samuel looked up at him with those dark, unblinking eyes and said, simply, "The voices teach me. They show me things in my mind, and I draw them in the dirt. They say the body is just a house, and when the house breaks, the person inside has to leave." This response terrified Whitmore in a way he could not articulate. The mere idea that a black child, one born into bondage, could possess knowledge and intelligence that might even exceed his own, challenged every single tenet his society held about racial hierarchy and the natural order. Samuel represented something profoundly dangerous, living proof that the entire system of slavery was constructed upon a lie. If an enslaved child could be this brilliant, this perceptive, this extraordinary without any formal education, what did that say about the claims of black inferiority that were used to justify the entire, brutal institution? In the summer of 1856, when Samuel was 4.5 years old, Robert Whitmore made a decision that would alter the trajectory of the boy's life forever. He sold Samuel to a slave trader passing through the parish, thus ridding himself of the child who made him so deeply uncomfortable, who challenged his entire worldview simply by existing. Samuel was torn from the only home he had ever known, separated from the community that had raised him after his mother's death, and transported north along the mighty Mississippi River. He was deemed too valuable for the brutal labor of the cotton fields. His intelligence was too obvious, his strangeness too marketable. The trader believed he could secure a premium price for such an unusual child, perhaps to a wealthy family in search of a curiosity, or to a medical institution interested in studying an exceptional case. But Samuel never made it to the auction block. During a stop in the town of Meow Creek, the slave trader, a man named Cyrus Blackwood, was suddenly and violently struck by illness, convulsing without warning. He was dead within hours, blood pouring from his nose and ears, his body racked with seizures that the local doctor could not explain. Samuel was present when it happened, standing perfectly calm in the corner of the boarding house room, watching with those unblinking dark eyes as Blackwood thrashed and screamed. When the authorities questioned him, Samuel said only, "He hurt children. The voices told me what he did. They said his time was finished." A subsequent investigation into Blackwood's background uncovered a deeply disturbing pattern. Over the preceding 5 years, numerous enslaved children in his custody had died under suspicious circumstances, disappearances explained away as runaways, bodies discovered in rivers and marked as drownings, sudden illnesses that struck only after Blackwood had purchased a child. Samuel had somehow known things about Blackwood that no one had previously been willing to investigate, secrets that had died with the trader in that boarding house room. With no one to claim ownership of Samuel and no legal guardian willing to take responsibility for an enslaved child with no papers, the boy found himself in a situation without precedent. He was, technically, free, though that word held almost no meaning for a black child in Louisiana in 1856. The local authorities considered sending him to an orphanage that took in abandoned children, but such institutions refused to accept a black child. He was too young to be put to work, too strange to be adopted by any local family, and far too intelligent to be simply ignored. It was Dr. Elizabeth Monroe who ultimately took Samuel into her household. Elizabeth was a rarity in the Antebellum South, a woman who had studied medicine in Philadelphia and returned to Louisiana to practice, despite the social stigma and legal barriers she constantly faced. She had inherited property from her father and used her financial independence to live according to her own principles, which included a quiet but firm opposition to the institution of slavery. When she heard about the strange black child who had been present at Cyrus Blackwood's death, her medical curiosity was immediately piqued. And when she finally met Samuel, looking directly into those dark, knowing eyes, she felt something she had never experienced before, a powerful mixture of fascination, fear, and an overwhelming sense that this child needed protection from a world that would surely destroy him if given the chance. "What is your name?" Dr. Monroe asked when Samuel was brought to her home by the local sheriff, who was visibly relieved to have found someone willing to take responsibility for the boy. Samuel looked at her with that intense, unblinking gaze and said, "Samuel Carter. My mama named me Samuel because it means, God has heard. She said I was born to hear things that others couldn't hear, to know things that others didn't know." The voices started talking to me before I could even talk back to them. Dr. Monroe was not a superstitious woman. She had been trained in the rational methods of scientific medicine, taught to trust observation and evidence over folklore and fear. But there was something about Samuel that challenged her very commitment to pure rationalism. The boy spoke with a clarity and vocabulary that should have been impossible for an illiterate child of his age. He described anatomical structures with a precision that even medical students often struggled to achieve. And when he talked about the voices, there was no hint of madness or confusion in his demeanor, only a calm, unnerving acceptance of a reality that others could not perceive. Dr. Monroe made Samuel a proposition. He could stay in her household, not as a servant or a ward, but as a subject of medical study. She would provide him with food, shelter, and an education, in exchange for his cooperation in helping her understand his unusual abilities. "I want to document what you can do," she explained carefully. "I want to understand how your mind works. But I will not treat you as a specimen or a curiosity. You will be treated with dignity and respect, and if at any time you wish to leave, I will help you find another situation." Samuel considered her offer with a seriousness that seemed far beyond his years. "The voices say you're different from the others," he finally said. "They say you see people as people, not as property or problems. They say you're trying to understand things that scare most folks. I'll stay with you, Dr. Monroe. But you need to know something. The people who come near me, the people who mean harm or carry darkness in their hearts, they don't live very long. I don't kill them. I just know when death is coming for them, and sometimes, the voices make sure it happens faster than it would have otherwise." This statement should have frightened Dr. Monroe away. Instead, it only served to deepen her fascination. She had studied cases of unusual mental abilities during her medical training, stories of individuals with exceptional memories, people who could perform complex mathematical calculations instantly, children who could reproduce musical compositions after a single hearing. But Samuel seemed to represent something entirely different, something that bridged the gap between exceptional cognitive ability and a phenomenon her scientific framework could not easily categorize. He wasn't merely intelligent, he appeared to possess knowledge that he could not possibly have acquired through normal learning. He didn't just have good intuition, he seemed to know specific, verifiable details about people and events that no amount of observation could have revealed to him. Dr. Monroe began her systematic study of Samuel Carter in August of 1856, just weeks after he came to live in her home. She created meticulous records of their daily interactions, documenting his statements, his behaviors, and the uncanny accuracy of his predictions. What she discovered both amazed and terrified her. Samuel could describe the internal organs of the human body with perfect accuracy, despite never having seen an anatomy text or witnessed a medical procedure. He could predict when people were going to become ill, often weeks before the first symptoms ever appeared. He knew intimate details about the lives of people he had never met, their deepest fears, their hidden secrets, their unconfessed sins. "How do you know these things?" Dr. Monroe asked him repeatedly, striving to find a rational explanation for abilities that appeared to defy natural law. Samuel's answer was always the same. "The voices tell me. They come from the swamp, from the place where the dead go but don't rest. They're people who died with unfinished business, with truths that need to be told. They use me to speak because I was born with the ability to hear them. My mama said it runs in our family. My grandmother had it, and her mother before her. It's a gift and a curse, Dr. Monroe. I know things I don't want to know. I see things I wish I couldn't see." The first death that occurred after Samuel came to live with Dr. Monroe happened in September of 1856. Marcus Thornton, a wealthy plantation owner from a neighboring parish, came to Meow Creek on business and stopped by Dr. Monroe's home to consult about persistent stomach pains. Samuel was in the house when Thornton arrived, and the boy's reaction was immediate and visceral. He backed away from the man, his dark eyes wide with a look that seemed to blend recognition and horror. "You shouldn't be here," Samuel said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible coming from such a small child. "The voices are screaming about you. They say you killed 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. They say you buried them where no one would look, in the old cemetery behind your plantation house, where the slave graves are unmarked. They say the children cry in the night, and their mothers still search for them." Marcus Thornton's face went white, then flushed a deep, dangerous red with rage. "How dare this slave child speak to me this way?" he shouted at Dr. Monroe. "Control your property, or I'll have him whipped for insolence." But there was something in Thornton's reaction that went beyond mere offense at a breach of social protocol. There was a genuine, gut-wrenching fear in his eyes, the unmistakable look of a man whose darkest secrets had been suddenly, inexplicably exposed to the light. Dr. Monroe, despite her own discomfort with the situation, defended Samuel. "He is not my property, Mr. Thornton. He is under my protection, and I would appreciate it if you would leave my home immediately." Thornton stormed out, his stomach pains apparently forgotten in his overwhelming rage and fear. 3 days later, he was found dead in his carriage on the road back to his plantation. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but Dr. Monroe, who was called to examine the body, noted several disturbing details. Thornton's eyes were wide open, frozen in an expression of absolute terror. His mouth was agape as if he had been screaming, and there were faint marks on his neck that looked almost like finger impressions, though no one had been with him in the carriage. When Dr. Monroe returned home and told Samuel what had happened, the boy showed no surprise. "The voices said he wouldn't make it home," Samuel explained calmly. "They said the children he killed were waiting for him on the road. They said it was time for him to answer for what he did." Dr. Monroe felt a chill run down her spine. "Samuel," she said carefully, "are you telling me that you somehow caused Mr. Thornton's death?" The boy shook his head. "I didn't cause anything, Dr. Monroe. I just knew it was going to happen. The voices don't lie about these things. When they say someone's time is finished, when they say someone has debts to pay in blood and suffering, it always comes true. I'm just the messenger." An investigation into Thornton's plantation revealed exactly what Samuel had described. In the old slave cemetery, hidden beneath unmarked graves, the authorities discovered the remains of 3 children, 2 boys aged approximately 8 and 10, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. All showed clear signs of violence that had nothing to do with the harsh realities of slavery and everything to do with the sadistic cruelty of a man who believed his wealth and power made him untouchable. The enslaved community on Thornton's plantation, when finally given the opportunity to speak without fear of reprisal, shared stories of children who had disappeared over the years, of Thornton's private quarters where screams were sometimes heard in the night, of a monster who wore the polished mask of a respected gentleman. Samuel had known all of this without ever setting foot on Thornton's property. He had known it the very moment he saw the man, as if the voices from the swamp had whispered every terrible detail directly into his mind. This was not coincidence. This was not lucky guessing. This was something for which Dr. Monroe's medical training had not prepared her to understand or explain. The second death came in October, just weeks after Thornton's mysterious demise. Reverend Silas Jameson, the pastor of Meow Creek's largest church, was a man who preached fervently about Christian charity and divine grace every Sunday, while quietly profiting from the slave trade during the week. He served as an agent for several plantations, helping to arrange the sales and transfers of enslaved people while taking a commission on each transaction. To his white congregation, he was a pillar of the community. To the black population of Meow Creek, he was something else entirely, a man who used scripture to justify cruelty and his position of trust to enable the separation of families and the perpetuation of suffering. Samuel encountered Reverend Jameson at the general store in town, where Dr. Monroe had taken him to purchase supplies. The Reverend approached them with his characteristic, insincere smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. "Dr. Monroe," he said warmly, "I see you've taken in young Samuel. What a charitable act. Though I must caution you about the dangers of educating these people beyond their station. God has ordained their place in society, and to disturb that natural order is to invite chaos and disorder." Samuel looked up at the Reverend with those dark, penetrating eyes and said, "You don't believe in God. The voices say you stopped believing years ago, after you sold a woman and her baby to different buyers. The woman killed herself, and the baby died within a month. You tell yourself it was just business, but the voices say you hear that woman crying in your dreams every night. They say you drink yourself to sleep trying to forget, but you never can. They say your time is coming soon, and you'll have to face all the people you hurt, all the families you destroyed." The change in Reverend Jameson's expression was immediate and terrifying. The warm facade dropped away, revealing something cold and vicious underneath. "That boy is possessed by demons," he hissed at Dr. Monroe. "He speaks blasphemy and lies. I will pray for his soul, but I warn you, keeping him in your home is inviting evil into your life." He left the store quickly, his hands shaking, his face pale beneath his carefully maintained beard. 2 weeks later, Reverend Jameson was found dead in his study, slumped over his desk with an empty bottle of laudanum beside him. The official verdict was suicide, a tragedy explained away as a sudden mental breakdown brought on by exhaustion and melancholy. But Dr. Monroe, examining the body at the request of the local authorities, noted that the Reverend's eyes held that same look of sheer terror she had seen in Thornton's corpse. His desk was covered with papers, letters he had been writing to various people, apparently attempting to make amends for past actions. One letter was addressed to a woman named Sarah, apologizing for selling her and her infant son to separate buyers 15 years earlier. The letter was unfinished, ending mid-sentence, as if Jameson had been interrupted by something that terrified him so completely he chose death over facing it. When Dr. Monroe returned home and found Samuel sitting quietly in the parlor, reading a book she had been teaching him to decipher, she didn't know what to say. The boy looked up at her with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and knowledge. "He couldn't live with what he'd done anymore," Samuel said softly. The voices followed him everywhere. They whispered the names of all the people he'd hurt, all the families he'd broken apart. They showed him what happened to Sarah's baby, how the child died crying for his mother in a plantation far away. The Reverend always knew it was wrong, Dr. Monroe. He just chose money and position over doing what was right. The voices don't forgive that kind of choice. Dr. Monroe sat down heavily in her chair, her medical rationalism struggling against the evidence that was accumulating before her eyes. "Samuel," she said carefully, "you need to understand how dangerous this is. People are dying after they encounter you. Even if you're not directly causing their deaths, the connection is becoming obvious. There are people in this town who already fear you, who see you as something unnatural. If more deaths occur, I won't be able to protect you from accusations of witchcraft or demonic possession." Samuel closed his book and looked at her with an expression of profound sadness. "I know, Dr. Monroe. I've always known. That's why my people have always kept gifts like mine hidden. That's why my mama taught me to be quiet, to never let the white folk see what I could really do. But sometimes the voices are so loud that I can't help but speak. Sometimes the things they show me are so terrible that staying silent feels like being part of the evil. I didn't ask for this gift, but I have it. And the voices say there's a reason, that I'm supposed to help bring truth to light, even when the truth is painful and dangerous. The pattern continued over the following months. People who came into contact with Samuel, individuals who carried significant guilt or evil in their hearts, began dying under mysterious circumstances. Not everyone, only those whom the voices marked as deserving of judgment. A slave catcher named William Drake, known for his particular cruelty in pursuing runaways, suffered a fatal accident when his horse inexplicably bolted and threw him against a tree, breaking his neck. Samuel had seen Drake in town 2 days before and had told Dr. Monroe, "That man has killed 12 people trying to escape. He's hunted human beings like they were animals. The voices say he'll die the same way he killed others, sudden and violent." A woman named Catherine Bellamy, who ran a boarding house where enslaved people were temporarily housed before being sold, died in her sleep with her face frozen in a silent scream. Samuel had encountered her at the market and had said quietly, "She poisons the food when people don't cooperate." The voices showed me 3 women who died because they refused to stop crying for their children. She'll die by poison, too. Not from anyone's hand, but from the fear that eats her alive from the inside. Each death was, on a technical level, explainable through natural causes or accidents. But the pattern was unmistakable to anyone who was paying attention. Samuel Carter knew things he should not have known. He predicted deaths with an uncanny accuracy. And the people who died were invariably those who had committed terrible acts, particularly acts of unspeakable cruelty toward enslaved people. It was as if Samuel served as a conduit for some form of cosmic justice, a vessel through which the accumulated suffering and rage of his people found both a voice and a means of retribution. Dr. Monroe's journals from this period reveal her growing confusion and fear. She was a scientist, trained to observe and document phenomena according to rational principles. But Samuel challenged every single framework she possessed for understanding the world. She conducted tests, trying to determine if his knowledge came from some form of heightened observational ability, or perhaps an exceptional memory that allowed him to recall and connect details that others missed. But the evidence consistently pointed towards something that lay beyond natural explanation. Samuel knew things he could not have observed. He described events he could not have witnessed. He predicted outcomes that no amount of careful deduction could have foreseen. The boy possesses knowledge that defies conventional explanation, Dr. Monroe wrote in her journal in January of 1857. He describes the internal structure of organs he has never seen dissected. He knows the names of diseases and their symptoms without having studied medicine. He can look at a person and tell me details about their past that he could not possibly have learned through normal means. Most disturbing of all, he predicts deaths with an accuracy that I can no longer dismiss as coincidence. I am forced to conclude that Samuel Carter either possesses some form of extrasensory perception that science has not yet discovered, or he is indeed in contact with something beyond our material world. As a physician and a woman of science, I find myself confronting the possibility that our understanding of human consciousness and the nature of reality itself may be fundamentally incomplete. The community's reaction to Samuel grew increasingly hostile as the pattern of deaths became more and more obvious. White residents of Meow Creek began to whisper that the boy was cursed, that he brought death wherever he went, that Dr. Monroe was foolish and dangerous for keeping him in her household. The enslaved population had a different reaction entirely. Many saw Samuel as a kind of avenging angel, a child chosen by God or the ancestors to bring justice to those who had escaped earthly punishment. Some believed he was a prophet. Others thought he might be one of the old spirits made flesh. But all recognized that Samuel was no ordinary child. Old Jeremiah, who had been sold away from the Whitmore plantation and now worked at a nearby farm, sought out Samuel in February of 1857. He found the boy sitting by the edge of the swamp that bordered Dr. Monroe's property, staring out at the dark water and twisted trees. "Boy," Jeremiah said softly, "I need to talk to you about what you are and what you can do." Samuel looked up at him with those knowing eyes. "You're going to tell me about the old ways," Samuel said. "About the people who came before us, the ones who brought their spirits and their power across the ocean. You're going to tell me that what I have isn't strange or evil. It's part of who we are as a people." Jeremiah sat down beside the child, his aged joints creaking with the motion. "Your mama had it, too," he said. "And her mama before her. It goes back and back, all the way to Africa, to the old ways that we weren't supposed to remember. They tried to beat it out of us, tried to make us forget our power. But some families kept it alive, passed it down in whispers and warnings. What you have, Samuel, it's called different things by different people. Some call it the sight. Some call it walking between worlds. Some say it's the voice of the ancestors speaking through the living. Whatever name you give it, it's real and it's dangerous, especially for a black child in a world that don't want us to have any power at all." Samuel listened intently as Jeremiah explained the history that had been hidden from him, the traditions that had been preserved despite every attempt to erase them. He learned about the griots in Africa who remembered the stories of their people, about the medicine workers who could see sickness before it manifested, about the wise ones who could communicate with the dead and bring messages from the other side. He learned that his gift was not a curse or an aberration, but a connection to something ancient and powerful, a link to the spiritual traditions of his ancestors that had survived the Middle Passage, survived slavery, survived everything designed to destroy the soul of his people. "But you need to be careful, boy," Jeremiah warned. "The white folks are already scared of you. They're scared because you represent everything they tell themselves ain't true, that we're just as smart as them, just as capable, just as human. And now you're showing them something even more frightening. That maybe we got gifts and abilities that they don't understand and can't control. They'll come for you eventually, Samuel. They always come for the ones who show too much power, too much knowledge, too much light. You need to learn when to hide what you can do, when to play small so they don't destroy you." Samuel nodded slowly, understanding the deep wisdom in the old man's words. But even as he listened, he knew that hiding was not going to be possible for much longer. The voices were getting louder, more insistent. They were showing him things that were coming, terrible things that would shake the very foundations of the world he lived in. They were showing him a war that would tear the country apart, showing him rivers of blood and fields of the dead. They were showing him the end of slavery, but also the long, brutal aftermath of emancipation. They were showing him his own future, short and bright and tragic, a candle that would burn with an intense flame before being extinguished by forces too powerful for him to resist. The turning point came in March of 1857, when Samuel encountered a man who would challenge everything he thought he knew about his gifts and their purpose. This man was different from the others Samuel had met. He didn't carry the same kind of guilt or evil that had marked the previous victims. His name was Benjamin Cole, and he was a slave trader who had recently arrived in Meow Creek with a cargo of 20 enslaved people he intended to sell at auction. But Benjamin Cole was also dying, slowly and painfully, of a cancer that was eating away at his insides. Samuel met Cole at Dr. Monroe's home when the slave trader came seeking medical treatment for his mysterious ailment. The moment Samuel saw him, the voices erupted in a cacophony unlike anything he had experienced before. They weren't condemning Cole or calling for his death. Instead, they were screaming a warning. "He's like you," they whispered urgently. "He has the gift, too, but he uses it differently. He uses it to find the weakest, the most vulnerable, the ones who will bring the highest price. He can see into people's souls, but he uses that vision for profit and cruelty. He's what you could become if you choose the wrong path." Dr. Monroe noticed Samuel's distress immediately. The boy had gone pale, his entire body trembling as if he were in the grip of a fever. "Samuel, what's wrong?" she asked, her concern evident. Samuel couldn't answer. His mind was overwhelmed with the staggering realization that he was not unique, that the gift he possessed could exist in others, and could be used for purposes that utterly perverted its original meaning. Benjamin Cole had been born with the same ability to see beyond the surface, to know things about people that were hidden from normal observation. But instead of using that gift to bring justice or truth, Cole had weaponized it to perfect the art of human trafficking. He could look at an enslaved person and know exactly what weaknesses to exploit, what prices to demand, what lies to tell to maximize his profit. Benjamin Cole looked at Samuel with eyes that held a terrible recognition. Well, he said softly, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and dark amusement. I've heard the stories about you, boy, the child who knows things he shouldn't know, who predicts deaths and speaks truths that frighten good Christian folk. I didn't believe the tales until now, but I can see it in you. That same spark I see in my own mirror. You're like me, Samuel Carter. We're both cursed or blessed, depending on how you look at it, to see the world as it really is, stripped of all the pretty lies people tell themselves. Samuel found his voice, though it came out hoarse and strained. I'm nothing like you, he said. The voices told me what you do. You take people who are already broken and you break them further. You look into their souls and find the exact words that will make them give up hope. You're everything the gift was never supposed to be used for. Cole laughed, a harsh sound that held no joy. Listen to yourself, boy. The gift was never supposed to be anything. It just is. You use it your way, passing judgment on people you've decided are evil, letting your voices whisper their condemnations until those people die in convenient accidents. I use it my way, making a living in a world that doesn't care about should or shouldn't, only about what works and what doesn't. Don't pretend you're better than me just because you've convinced yourself you're on the side of righteousness. This confrontation shook Samuel to his very core. Was Cole right? Was his gift merely a tool that could be used for any purpose, good or evil, depending solely on the wielder's intentions? Were the voices that guided him truly sources of divine or ancestral justice? Or were they just reflections of his own anger and pain, his own desperate desire to see those who hurt his people suffer consequences? For the first time since his mother's death, Samuel felt a genuine, gnawing doubt about his purpose and his path. Dr. Monroe sent Cole away with a tincture for his pain and a grim prognosis. The cancer would kill him within 6 months, possibly sooner. After the slave trader left, she sat down with Samuel and waited for him to speak. The boy was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the swamp beyond. Finally, he said, "What if I'm wrong about everything, Dr. Monroe? What if the voices aren't messages from the dead or the ancestors? What if they're just my own mind, twisted by anger and grief, creating justifications for wanting people to suffer?" Dr. Monroe chose her words with extreme care. "Samuel, I can't tell you whether your voices are real in the way you believe them to be. I don't have the knowledge or wisdom to make that determination. But I can tell you what I've observed. The information you provide is accurate in ways that exceed any natural explanation I can conceive. You've revealed truths about people that led to the discovery of crimes that might otherwise have remained hidden. The people who have died after encountering you were, without exception, individuals who had caused tremendous suffering to others. Whether that's justice or vengeance, whether it's divine intervention or some unknown psychological phenomenon, I cannot say. But I believe your intentions matter. Benjamin Cole uses his gifts, whatever they may be, to cause harm. You use yours to expose harm that has already been done. That distinction may not satisfy philosophical inquiry, but it matters in the practical reality of human existence." Samuel took some comfort from Dr. Monroe's words, but the doubt planted by his encounter with Benjamin Cole continued to grow within him. Over the following weeks, he became more withdrawn, less willing to speak about what the voices told him. He still heard them, still saw the visions they sent, but he began to question whether acting on that information was truly justice or merely his own desire for revenge against a world that had taken everything from him. Benjamin Cole died in May of 1857, his body finally succumbing to the cancer that had been consuming him. But before he died, he did something that would change Samuel's life irrevocably. He confessed, not to a priest or to law enforcement, but to Dr. Monroe in a letter that arrived 3 days after his death. In it, Cole described in excruciating detail the methods he had used to break the spirits of the people he trafficked. He listed names, dozens of them, of individuals he had sold, including information about where they had been sent and what had happened to them. He described the psychological torture he inflicted, the way he used his unnatural perception to find each person's deepest vulnerability and exploit it until they became compliant, defeated, easier to sell. And at the end of the letter, he wrote, "That boy, Samuel Carter, he saw what I was the moment we met. I spent my whole life believing I was using my gift wisely, making the best of an ugly world. But looking into that child's eyes, I saw myself reflected back and I realized I had become a monster. The cancer eating my body is nothing compared to the rot that's been consuming my soul. Tell the boy he was right. Tell him he's better than me. Tell him to never become what I became, no matter how tempting it might be to use his power for personal gain. And give the enclosed documents to the abolitionists in the North. Maybe some of the people I destroyed can be found and reunited with their families. It won't redeem me, but maybe it will count for something in whatever judgment awaits me." The documents Cole included with his letter contained detailed records of his transactions over 20 years of slave trading, names, ages, descriptions, sale prices, destination plantations, everything an abolitionist network would need to potentially locate and track enslaved people who had been separated from their families. Dr. Monroe, recognizing both the immense value and the inherent danger of these documents, carefully copied them and sent the copies to contacts she had in the North, people who worked with the Underground Railroad and other networks dedicated to helping enslaved people escape to freedom. Samuel's reaction to Cole's confession was complex. On one hand, it validated his initial assessment of the man and confirmed that his gift had not misled him. On the other hand, it raised troubling questions about the nature of redemption and judgment. Cole had done terrible things, but his final act had been one of genuine remorse and an attempt to partially right his wrongs. Did that count for anything? Did the voices consider such late-age repentance meaningful? If Cole had lived long enough to act on his regrets, would he have been spared the judgment that befell others who never showed a moment of remorse? These questions occupied Samuel's thoughts through the summer of 1857 as he continued his strange life in Dr. Monroe's household. She was teaching him to read and write with increasing sophistication, exposing him to books on medicine, philosophy, and science. He absorbed information with a remarkable speed, his mind hungry for knowledge that could help him understand the world and his place within it. But even as his education progressed, the voices continued their relentless communication, showing him visions of events both near and far, from the past and from the future. In August of 1857, Samuel began experiencing visions that were different from anything he had encountered before. Instead of showing him individual people and their secrets, the voices were showing him masses of humanity in motion, armies marching, cities burning, rivers running red with blood. He saw black men in Union blue uniforms, fighting and dying for a freedom that would come at an almost unbearable cost. He saw Lincoln signing documents that would change the legal status of millions. He saw the joy of liberation followed by the terror of Reconstruction and the rise of new forms of oppression designed to maintain white supremacy through violence and intimidation. He saw generations stretching forward, each fighting the same battles in different forms, each pushing incrementally toward a justice that remained always, frustratingly, just out of reach. These visions exhausted Samuel in ways that his previous experiences had not. He began losing weight, sleeping poorly, waking in the night with screams that brought Dr. Monroe running to his room. "They're showing me too much," he told her during one of these midnight episodes. "They're showing me what's coming, not just for individuals, but for all of us. There's a war coming, Dr. Monroe. A war that will tear this country apart. And even when it's over, even when slavery ends, the hatred and violence won't stop. They'll find new ways to keep us in chains. They'll create new laws and new systems to maintain the same cruelty under different names. And it will go on and on for generations, maybe forever." Dr. Monroe held the trembling boy, feeling utterly helpless in the face of visions she couldn't see and horrors she couldn't prevent. "Samuel," she said softly, "you can't carry the weight of all that suffering. You can't hold the pain of the past and the future all at once. You're just a child. Even with your extraordinary gifts, you're still just a child." But Samuel shook his head, a gesture of weary resignation. "I stopped being just a child when my mama died and the voices started talking to me. I stopped being just a child when I realized I could see into people's souls and know their secrets. The voices don't care that I'm young, Dr. Monroe. They use me because I'm available, because I was born with the ability to hear them. But sometimes I wish I was deaf to them. Sometimes I wish I was just a normal boy who didn't know anything except how to play and laugh and be free from all this knowledge." The ninth and final death that would occur during Samuel's time in Meow Creek happened in September of 1857. And it was the death that would force Dr. Monroe to make an impossible choice about the boy's future. The victim was Judge Albert Crane, one of the most powerful men in the parish, a man whose legal decisions had upheld the institution of slavery through decades of carefully reasoned opinions that treated human beings as mere property. Crane was known for his particular harshness in cases involving enslaved people accused of crimes. His verdicts were swift, his sentences brutal, his justifications rooted in a philosophy that coldly denied the full humanity of black people. Samuel encountered Judge Crane at a social gathering Dr. Monroe attended, bringing the boy with her despite the social impropriety of bringing a black child to a white social event. She had been invited because of her medical expertise, and she brought Samuel because she was increasingly reluctant to leave him alone. The moment Samuel saw Judge Crane, his face went pale and his body rigid. The voices erupted with an intensity that was almost physical, their message so loud and insistent that Samuel couldn't help but speak it aloud. "You sentenced a man to death for trying to protect his daughter," Samuel said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence that fell over the gathering. "His name was Thomas. He killed the overseer who was raping his 15-year-old daughter. You said, a slave has no right to defend his family. That property cannot commit justifiable homicide against its owners. You watched him hang and you felt nothing. You've sent 47 people to death by hanging, 213 to brutal whipping, countless others to be sold away from their families as punishment. The voices say every single one of those people is waiting for you. They say your judgment is coming, and it will be as merciless as the judgments you handed down." The reaction was immediate and violent. Judge Crane, his face purple with rage, demanded that Samuel be removed and punished for his insolence. Several men at the gathering moved toward the boy with the clear intent to inflict immediate physical harm. Dr. Monroe positioned herself between Samuel and the angry mob, her voice sharp and commanding. "This child is under my protection and is speaking from a place of mental disturbance. He means no harm and deserves compassion, not violence." But Judge Crane was not satisfied. "That boy has pronounced a death sentence on me based on lies and delusions. He will be taken into custody and punished according to the law. No black child will threaten a sitting judge and escape consequences." Dr. Monroe knew she had only moments to act. She gathered Samuel quickly and left the gathering, ignoring the shouts and threats that followed them. They returned to her home and she began making immediate arrangements. "Samuel," she said urgently, "you need to leave Meow Creek tonight. Judge Crane will send men to arrest you, possibly to lynch you without any pretense of legal process. I have contacts in the north who can help you reach safety, but you must leave immediately." Samuel looked at her with those ancient eyes and said quietly, "It doesn't matter if I leave, Dr. Monroe. The judge will die within 3 days regardless of where I am. The voices have already pronounced their judgment. His death is already set in motion. But you're right that I should leave. Not to save him, but to save you from being implicated in what's coming." That night, Dr. Monroe arranged for Samuel to be taken by trusted allies along a secret route toward freedom. She gave him documents claiming he was a free black child traveling with permission, though they both knew such papers would provide minimal protection. She gave him what money she could spare and letters of introduction to abolitionists in the North who might help him. And she held him close for a moment, this extraordinary child who had changed her understanding of reality itself. "Will I ever see you again?" she asked. Samuel smiled sadly. "The voices show me many possible futures, Dr. Monroe. In some, we meet again. In others, we don't. But in all of them, I remember you as the one person who saw me as human first, as exceptional second. You treated me with dignity when the world wanted to treat me as either a slave or a monster. I'll carry that with me wherever I go." Samuel Carter disappeared into the night, guided by conductors on the Underground Railroad who risked everything to help enslaved people and free black children escape to safety. Dr. Monroe never saw him again, though she spent the rest of her life wondering what became of the extraordinary boy who had briefly illuminated her understanding of human potential. 3 days after Samuel's departure, Judge Albert Crane was found dead in his chambers. He had apparently suffered a massive stroke, his body discovered slumped over the legal documents he had been reviewing. But those who prepared his body for burial reported strange details. His eyes were wide open, frozen in an expression of absolute terror. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and witnesses claimed that in the moments before his death, people in the courthouse had heard what sounded like many voices, all speaking at once. Though no one could make out the words, the enslaved people in the parish whispered that the ghosts of all the people Crane had condemned had come to collect their debt, that they had surrounded him in his final moments and shown him the faces of everyone he had destroyed. Whether that was true or merely folklore born from a desperate need for justice, no one could say with certainty. Dr. Elizabeth Monroe continued her medical practice in Meow Creek until the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. When Union forces occupied Louisiana in 1862, she volunteered her services as a physician to treat wounded soldiers, both Union and Confederate, making no distinction between them. In her journals from this period, she wrote extensively about Samuel, trying to make sense of what she had witnessed and documented during their time together. She developed a theory that Samuel represented an evolutionary adaptation, a survival mechanism developed by an oppressed people who needed ways to identify threats and protect themselves in a world designed to destroy them. But even as she formulated these scientific explanations, she could not fully dismiss the possibility that Samuel's gifts were exactly what he claimed them to be: communications from the dead, messages from ancestors who refused to let their suffering be forgotten or erased. Dr. Monroe died in 1891, but before her death, she arranged for her journals to be donated to a medical college in Philadelphia with specific instructions that they be sealed for 50 years. She did not want Samuel to be hunted or studied as a curiosity, but she also believed that future generations might benefit from the careful documentation she had so meticulously compiled. Those journals were opened in 1941 and studied by researchers trying to understand the limits of human perception and consciousness. The case of Samuel Carter became the subject of academic papers in psychology, neurology, and even parapsychology. But the journals ultimately raised more questions than they answered, providing meticulous documentation of extraordinary events without offering any single, definitive explanation for how such events were even possible. As for Samuel Carter himself, his story does not end with his departure from Meow Creek. Reports of a black boy with uncanny abilities began appearing in northern states in the late 1850s. A child in Pennsylvania who could diagnose illnesses with remarkable accuracy despite having no medical training. A young man in Massachusetts who helped locate the bodies of murder victims by claiming to hear their voices calling for justice. A teenager in Ohio who worked with the Underground Railroad and seemed to know with certainty which conductors could be trusted and which routes were compromised. Whether these were all the same person, or whether Samuel's gifts were less unique than Dr. Monroe had believed, remains an open question. During the Civil War, stories emerged of a black scout working with Union forces who could predict Confederate troop movements and identify spies with what seemed like supernatural accuracy. Some accounts describe a young man who would stand on battlefields after the fighting had ended, tears streaming down his face, speaking to the dead as if he could see and hear them standing there. Soldiers reported that this young man seemed to be taking messages from the dying, recording their final words, learning their names so that their families could be notified. Several Union officers mentioned in their correspondence a remarkable black man named Samuel, who possessed an intelligence and abilities that exceeded anything they had previously encountered. But official military records from the period are incomplete and often contradictory. After the war ended and Reconstruction began, reports of Samuel became less frequent but more disturbing. He appeared in places where racial violence was occurring, lynchings, massacres, riots where white mobs attacked black communities. Survivors of these atrocities sometimes mentioned a thin black man with ancient eyes who would appear afterward, documenting what had happened, recording the names of the dead, bearing witness to horrors that the official historical record would try to erase or minimize. Some claimed he could identify the perpetrators of violence even when they hid behind masks and sheets, that he spoke the names of murderers with absolute certainty, names that the voices from the swamp had revealed to him. One of the most detailed accounts comes from Colfax, Louisiana, where in 1873, a white mob massacred between 60 and 150 black men in what is considered one of the worst instances of racial violence in American history. A survivor named Isaiah Freeman later testified that after the massacre, a man who called himself Samuel came to the site and spent hours walking among the dead, speaking to them as if they could hear him. He was taking down their names, Freeman recalled in an interview conducted in 1920. He said the voices told him each name, told him who they had been in life, who their families were. He said he was making a record that couldn't be destroyed or forgotten, a record that would last longer than any written document. I asked him how he could stand to be among so much death. And he said, "I've been walking among the dead since I was 4 years old. They're no more frightening than the living. Often, they're more honest." The last confirmed sighting of someone who might have been Samuel Carter occurred in 1899 in Wilmington, North Carolina, in the aftermath of a coup d'état where white supremacists overthrew the legitimately elected local government and murdered dozens of black citizens. A black journalist named Alexander Manley, who was forced to flee the city, wrote about encountering a man who claimed to be documenting the massacre, for a record that would outlast the lies white folks tell about what really happened here. According to Manley's account, this man was in his late 40s, thin and worn, with eyes that looked like they had seen every terrible thing that could happen to our people and remembered all of it. When Manley asked the man his name, he replied, "I've been called many names. Samuel is the one my mother gave me. It means, God has heard." I hope she was right about that. After 1899, there are no further documented sightings of Samuel Carter, though his legend persisted in black communities throughout the South. He became a folk figure, a ghost story parents told their children, sometimes as a warning, "Be good or Samuel Carter will know your secrets," and sometimes as a source of hope, "No matter what they do to us, Samuel Carter writes it all down. And one day there will be a reckoning." Some claimed he had died, finally released from the burden of hearing voices that never stopped speaking. Others insisted he had found a way to silence the voices and live a normal life under a new identity. Still others believed he was still out there somewhere, still walking among the dead, still recording the names and stories of black people whose suffering might otherwise be forgotten. Dr. Monroe's journals end with a reflection, written shortly before her death, that captures both the mystery and the profound meaning of Samuel Carter's story. "I spent years trying to understand Samuel scientifically, trying to find a rational explanation for abilities that defied rational explanation. But perhaps I was asking the wrong questions. Perhaps the point was never to understand how he did what he did, but rather to recognize what his existence meant." Samuel Carter was proof that black people possessed capabilities and intelligence that the society of his time refused to acknowledge. He was proof that oppression and suffering do not destroy the human spirit but sometimes refine it into something extraordinary. He was proof that justice, even when denied by human institutions, finds ways to assert itself through unexpected channels. Whether his voices were real or metaphorical, whether his gift was supernatural or simply an expression of human potential we don't yet understand, the result was the same. Truths were revealed, crimes were exposed, and a child who should have been crushed by the weight of slavery instead became a force for accountability and remembrance. That matters more than any scientific explanation I could have provided. The story of Samuel Carter challenges us to confront uncomfortable questions about genius, about gifts that exceed normal human capacity, and about how society responds when those gifts manifest in people it has systematically designated as inferior. How many other Samuel Carters existed in the centuries of American slavery? Brilliant minds, extraordinary abilities, children with gifts that could have changed the world, who were destroyed before they could fully manifest their potential. How many voices were silenced? How many gifts were crushed? How many possibilities were erased by a system designed to deny the full humanity of an entire people? Samuel Carter was exceptional, but the conditions that shaped him were not. Every black child born into slavery faced the same existential threat, the same denial of basic humanity, the same violent suppression of potential. Samuel survived and found ways to use his gifts because a few people, his mother, Dr. Monroe, the conductors on the Underground Railroad, chose to see him as human first and protected him when they could. But for every Samuel Carter who found protection, thousands of others did not. Their stories are lost, their names forgotten, their gifts never realized because they were born into a system designed to destroy exactly what made them extraordinary. The mystery of Samuel Carter, ultimately, is not about whether his voices were real or whether he truly possessed supernatural abilities. The mystery is about what it means to be human, to possess gifts and intelligence and potential in a world that denies your very right to exist as a full person. The mystery is about how genius survives oppression. How truth finds a voice even when speaking truth is dangerous. How justice asserts itself even when every official institution denies it. The mystery is about the countless brilliant black minds that existed in the darkness of slavery and the centuries that followed, minds that changed their communities in quiet ways even when they couldn't change the larger world. Samuel Carter may have heard voices from the swamp, or he may have simply been so attuned to the collective suffering of his people that he could sense injustice the way others sense changes in the weather. Either way, he represented something that terrified the architects of white supremacy, proof that the entire edifice of racial hierarchy was built on lies. His intelligence, his gifts, his very existence challenged every justification for slavery and oppression. That's why his story was buried. That's why the official records were destroyed or hidden. That's why even the detailed documentation Dr. Monroe compiled was sealed away for decades. Samuel Carter was dangerous not because of how people died around him, but because of what he proved by living, that black humanity, black intelligence, black potential could not be erased, no matter how brutal the system designed to accomplish that erasure. What do you think of this story? Do you believe Samuel Carter truly heard voices from the dead? Or was his gift something else entirely, a form of human perception we still don't fully understand? Have you heard stories in your own family about ancestors who seemed to know things they shouldn't have known, who had gifts that defied explanation? Leave your comments below and let us know your thoughts about this remarkable chapter in Black American history. If you found this story powerful and want to hear more untold stories of extraordinary black people who changed history in ways that were never properly recognized, subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell and share this video with someone who needs to know that our ancestors were brilliant, powerful, and extraordinary, even in the darkest of circumstances. Remember, the stories they tried to erase are the stories we must tell loudest. The voices they tried to silence are the voices we must amplify. And the lives they tried to reduce to property and statistics were lives full of intelligence, gifts, and humanity that changed the world, even when the world refused to acknowledge it. See you in the next video, where we continue to uncover the hidden history of our people.